Good morning. This is the BLAINESWORLD podcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. You can also listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And you get more information and listen to previous shows at the website, which is www.blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And it's my pleasure to be speaking to an actor friend of mine, and she is Amanda Ladd. And Amanda, you can wave to all your fans and friends who might be watching this. Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, and so this is Amanda. And I should mention, Amanda, that this show typically focuses on some of the good stuff and good news about what's happening in Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And you're going to be part of it because, as we'll talk about, you're in an upcoming play at SAWT, and the play opens when?
It opens May 19th.
Okay, May 19th coming up. And yeah, it's coming up this weekend it'll be. And the name of the play is?
The play is called The Azure Sky in Oz by William Levengood.
Okay, and what I typically do, Amanda, the first time I meet somebody on air, because I've seen your work, but I've never, I guess, had the honor of interviewing you in the past. But I like finding out a little bit about your background. Now, so go way back when, in terms of when you were a little girl, you grew up where?
I was born in Tennessee, just over the mountain, outside of Johnson City. But then when I was 8, I moved to St. Pete, Florida. So I grew up in the St. Pete, Tampa area, went to high school there. And then for college, I came back to the mountains and went to school at Mars Hill.
And so when you were growing up in Florida, did you always know you wanted to be an actor?
Yes, from a very, very early age. I was a part of Suncoast Children's Theater. My aunt was a choir director at a church, and even though I don't have a religious background, she got me involved very young in the choir. So I did a lot of singing. I did a lot of dancing. I was a ballroom dancer. I was an ice skater. So I did a lot of disciplines that kind of added up to becoming a performing artist, and I always knew that that's what I wanted to do.
Now, here's the question, if you remember it. Do you remember your very first role you were on stage?
The very first role.
or one of your first roles, yeah.
I think that the very first role that I did was the Ugly Duckling for Suncoast Children's Theater, and I was the Ugly Duckling.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, the one that I remember the most clearly is a musical that I did in high school. And actually, I must have been in 8th grade. I think I was in 8th grade, but I was in the high school musical. And I was the horse's rear end in the chorus of Hello, Dolly.
The reason I ask that, I want you to keep that in mind, because I have this great idea, Amanda, which I've shared with other people. I'll share it with you. But as a fundraiser, I want everybody to recreate their first role, So can you imagine, you come back, it'd be a great fundraiser for SAWT, and I've told several people there that everybody recreate their first 5 minutes of their first role, because when you were the Ugly Duckling or when you were the horse's ass, whatever, is there a tape of that somewhere?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I would have to go back to my high school and see if they have an archival. I don't have one personally. And then the Ugly Duckling, I don't think so. It was, I feel very lucky to have grown up in a non-digital age. So I don't think my parents really took a lot of recordings. The first recording I have of me as a young person was ice skating to Madonna's Lucky Star.
Okay, you have that. I'm saying, wouldn't this be a great gift to give to your husband, or I don't know if your parents are still around, but if you could recreate that first role and then you could have it, to show everybody.
I think that's a great idea, Blaine. I think that's a great idea.
I think it'd be a lot of fun. But so you then acted, so you got the acting bug, and so you acted throughout high school? Were you in?
I did. I acted throughout high school. And then when I was a senior in high school, I got involved with an opera, which was a professional production of La Boheme. And Anton Coppola was the maestro, who is Francis Ford Coppola's brother. He can't be still alive. He was in his 80s when he directed that. But I was in the chorus of La Boheme, and that was my first real professional show. That was when I was 17. And then I majored in musical theater in college.
And let's take us through that period. So you also went to Mars Hill University,
I did.
and that was, which is very exciting probably for you. That was, I guess, when the musical theater department, especially, was at the heyday of its.
Yes.
They had like a fantastic musical theater department. And so, were you in all the shows at Mars Hill at that time?
I was in a lot of them. Yes, I was. Steve Chickerell was the musical theater head of the department at the time when I first came in. Cynthia was my voice teacher, who I have lost track of, and I would love to catch up with her.
By the way, do you have, hold on a second, do you have her, do you remember her last name, Cynthia?
Perkins.
Okay, a reason I mentioned that too, because we're just giving a shout out now to Cynthia Perkins. So if you can find her on Facebook or LinkedIn, wouldn't that be cool if we could show her,
I
get
will
her
absolutely, yeah, I'll absolutely try to look her up because she was a huge inspiration to me. Cynthia and I had a very embattled relationship. I used to smoke cigarettes, and I was, I was very I was the anti-ingenue. Everybody was always trying to cast me as the ingenue, and I wanted to be the character actor, and I was very brassy. And she really challenged me, and she ended up being one of my biggest advocates
Oh,
and biggest fighters. She's an amazing woman. Julie Fortney also was part of the musical theater department, and she was a real wonderful teacher. So yeah, I did Anything Goes. I starred in Anything Goes. I was in when Jim Thomas was there. I
sure.
came in under Jim Thomas. And my first big role was in No Exit, which I actually a few years ago got to play the same role. I think 15 years later, I got to play Estelle in No Exit in New York City at Soho Rep. So that was a very full circle moment for me. But No Exit was my first big play that I did at SART. I mean, not at SART, at
At Morris Hill. And I want to thank you also for mentioning some of these names, because I think like sometimes teachers don't get the credit they deserve, And so just that you mentioned the name, if we can track them down, it'd really be cool that, you remember them all these years and still give them the credit for some of the help they gave you. And that's something else you said that was kind of interesting and a kind of compliment to Mars Hill University, that I guess there were two ways you could perform, so that you could perform during the college season. And I remember I used to love the college productions. They were really good productions. And then you also had the opportunity sometimes to perform in the summer and saw it.
Absolutely. My first summer as a freshman, coming out of my freshman year in college, I worked in the box office, and I was the stage manager, not the stage manager, the house manager and the box office manager at SART. And so I wasn't even on stage my first summer. And I learned so much. That summer, they did Fiddler on the Roof. And what else was in there in that space? I'm blanking on what else was there, but yeah. And then I went on every summer to perform at SART. And my most memorable roles at SART, I was in Spitfire Grill, the musical,
Okay.
with Liz Aiello. I did a few plays with Liz. I did Kiss Me Kate, which was so fantastic and so fun to do with her. I also did Hank Williams' Lost Highway with Randy Nugent, who is a dear friend of mine. I actually just did a Hank Williams play of his in New York City. We're still very good friends, Randy Nugent and I. And he wrote a play called Mrs. Hank, which is
Oh,
about
really?
Audrey. And so I played Lucretia, the daughter. And so but doing Lost Highway all those years ago was sort of the genesis of that, of that coming to be.
Well, it's funny, two names you mentioned, I've also had on this show. Both, I think I've had Liz, but I've also had Randy. I don't know if you get a chance, but this weekend I'm honored to be performing with Liz. She's in a musical review. It's going to be at a Parkway Playhouse. I don't know if you
I
have
just
it.
saw her yesterday. She told me about that.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
and she's doing amazingly well, I think. Will you are you have a performance? It's on Saturday night. Are you performing Saturday night?
I am. So I'm
Oh,
gonna miss the Broadway performance, unfortunately.
but it's
Yeah.
so great to perform with Liz, and I think she's doing remarkably well. Oh, that's so cool. You saw her. And then you'll miss my singing debut though. I actually get to sing one song. I don't know if you heard about that. but
No, what are you singing, Blaine?
I'm a singer, but I sing. It's a very demanding role. You talk about La Boheme. It's right up there with that performance. I'm singing Tequila. Okay, so that's that's about my speed. I can do, one word. I can memorize one word. So you'll miss that, but hopefully you'll catch it next time. I think we're doing it a couple months later, but very exciting stuff. So let's talk about the fact that you've been acting all these years, and what brought you back to then Mars Hill, and then you have this one woman play we want to talk about. How come you came back?
Well, Bill Gregg is my mentor. He ended up coming into the program about halfway through my
Right.
years in school at Mars Hill. And he's directed me in so many things throughout the years at SART. And then when he left SART and things sort of changed, it's always been on my radar. It's always been really, really important to me.
Chelsea, right.
Gaddy Morelli, Chelsea, who runs SART now, and will Chelsea, we didn't go to school at the same time, but she has always been a dear friend of mine, and we've worked together through the years. Before that, Mandy Sales, who is a very good friend of mine, was running SART for a short period of time. So I've always sort of been in the circle of friends of SART, and it's been important to me to see that it succeeds and that we continue to try and build on the rich history that's there. So I've tried to be a part of as many fundraisers as possible up here at Wolf Laurel, and whenever I have time to come into the area. And I have come back to SART over the years to do different plays. The last thing I did there was Miracle Worker. Before that, I did Trade and Paint and Don't Dress for Dinner. But I had done a one-woman show at Mars Hill as a graduate, as a professional actor. I did a show many years ago that Bill Gregg directed. It was my first one-person show. And we had a Ford Foundation grant to come in for difficult dialogues, I think with the religion department. Anyway, I came in and I did a production of My Name is Rachel Corrie, which was a very controversial one-woman show about a real person who was killed by she was run over by a Caterpillar construction thing in Palestine. She was advocating for Palestinians. And because of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, this was an American girl who was killed. There was all kinds of controversy surrounding it. And I thought that we handled it in a beautiful way because we brought in people from both sides of the discussion to talk about it. So that was the first time I did a one-person play, and I was really challenged. I was young. I was in my 20s. And I've been looking throughout my career for a one-person show that really spoke to me, and that I felt like I could do something with. So this show, The Azure Sky in Oz, my friend William Levengood, who is a playwright from Florida, we actually met in New York City. He and I are both a part of New Circle Theater Company, which is the ascendant company of Circle Rep from back in the 80s. And Bill is an amazing playwright. He's had multiple off-Broadway productions. He's a two-time Eugene O'Neill award-winning playwright. And he wrote this play, The Azure Sky in Oz, about two real women. Michelle Fulner Castro, who's a visual artist who currently lives in California, and Mary Tilford, who is a special education teacher in Deltona, Florida. So Act 1 is about Michelle and Act 2 is about Mary. And both of these women are people that he has been very, very dear friends with from the beginnings of their careers. And so this play is about being a mother, being an artist, being a teacher with those who are neurodiverse. So Act 1, Michelle is a visual artist who also has a profoundly autistic son. And Act 2, Mary Tilford, she does The Wizard of Oz with her special ed students. So it's about struggle and triumph, but it's also about hope. And they're very difficult topics that a lot of people don't discuss enough, but I feel like everyone has been touched by. I did this production down in St. Petersburg, Florida at Studio Grand Central in December of 2021. And then it was very successful, and we decided to take it to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in Scotland, which I had 28 performances of, and it was breakneck exciting. Edinburgh, for those who don't know, is in Scotland, and it's the largest theater festival in the world. And I had never been before, and it changed my life. It was just the most amazing experience. But we got rave reviews from the Scotsmen and from audiences. And then I brought it back to New York City, and I did it at the United Solo Festival. And we sold out and had an extended performance, and we also got reviewed there. So I spoke to Chelsea about this show, and Chelsea has had her own triumphs and struggles with autism
Sure.
and in her life. And so I performed it for her, and they decided that they wanted to add it to their season. And I was so excited to be able to bring it here because it feels very full circle.
When did you go to Scotland?
I went this August of 2022.
Okay, so fairly recently. I mean, that's exciting. And so this is the first time this has been in this area of the show?
It is. It's the first time that we've been able to bring it here.
Has it been shown anywhere else in the country, in the United States?
St. Petersburg, Florida, and then in New York City. I just did it in New York in October and November of this of 2022.
Well, let me ask you, Amanda, I always wonder about one-person plays. A preference now, I mean, do you enjoy doing them, or would you rather be in a full production? How do you feel about it?
Okay, so so anybody who's ever done a one-person play, and this is a shout out to Pasquale too, who's doing Goodnight Gracie in rep with my show here at SART.
And that's, by the way, Pasquale Lacourt is going to be in that show. Yeah.
I have intense respect for anybody who takes on a one-person show. My good friend Randy Nugent, who's done a one-man Woody, he's done a one-man Pete Seeger, he's working on London right now. He actually sherped me through the whole idea of doing Edinburgh because he had taken Woody there before. And I have to thank him for really sort of showing me the ropes and teaching me like what I needed to do and how to get hooked up with the right festival. And it was a really amazing experience. But doing a one-person show, coming out of the pandemic, I had done one other professional production. So, we were dark for 2 years as theater artists for the most part.
Sure.
And St. Pete, Florida was the Studio Grand Central that I did Azure Sky at originally. They also developed another original play of Bill Levengood's, the writer of Azure Sky. And we did that and had a contract down in St. Pete. That was the first show that I had done on stage since all the craziness happened. I never thought that I was going to be on stage again. And so I felt so blessed to be able to do it. And then Bill came to me with this show and he was like, "What do you think?" And I read it and I immediately had a resonance with the characters. And I knew that it was an important piece of theater that needed to be done. And it was a challenge for me. So I jumped right in and I felt really grateful to have that, because doing theater in a post-pandemic time, especially right after we came out of the pandemic, it was very expensive for theaters to produce. And it was dangerous because if someone got sick, they had to cancel the production. As a one-person show, I was able to feel very insulated in doing this. So I had that whole year to work on that show, doing a run of it down in St. Petersburg, but then taking it to Edinburgh and then taking it to New York City. I felt like I was eliminating a bunch of different variables that made it difficult to produce and perform theater in a post-COVID era.
Has the playwright seen the show? Has playwright seen you in the show?
Oh yes, the playwright directed it as well.
Oh,
So
okay.
he wrote and directed the play, and we did that down in St. Pete. And then he came up to North Carolina because my husband and I have a house here in Wolf Laurel. So I live in Brooklyn. That's where I spend most of my time. I'm a New York City actor and director, and I spend part of my time though in North Carolina because I have family here and we love the mountains here. So Bill, when we bought this house, Bill came up right before I left for Edinburgh, and we did rehearsals here in North Carolina. And that's when I took the show to Chelsea, and she met Bill, the director and playwright, and also got to see this production or that iteration of it before I took it to Scotland. And that's how we ended up bringing it to SART, was because we were rehearsing it here at that time.
Now, the reality you haven't touched upon, but I sometimes ask actors, one-person plays. I guess the one advantage doing one-person play, though, is that if you blow a line, nobody knows but you.
Yeah, that's true. I got off on a tangent talking about doing a one-person show. The reason I have so much respect for people who do one-person shows is because as theater artists, I think our makeup, the way that we're built as people we're community builders. We need a tribe in order to put on a show. And we feed off the energy of the audience, but also each other. For
Sure.
me, process is everything. The rehearsal room is everything. And so doing it alone, it is isolating and it can be very lonely. And so it takes a lot of dedication, and you have to really love the material. You have to believe in the material. You have to live it in your bones, and you really have to go within. And that's a different, I feel like that's a different way of being. I've gotten in touch with my introvert. I feel like I'm a very much an extroverted person, but I think all of us hold introvert and extrovert in our personalities. And doing a one-person show, you actually really have to tap into that introvert in order to fully embody it and bring your best characters to life on stage for the audience.
And in this particular show, who would you say should be seeing this? Who's the audience for it?
This audience is for anyone who is a parent, anyone who is a teacher or an educator, anyone who has family members or has been touched by neurodiversity or autism, and anyone who loves beautifully crafted theater. Stories of women who not only are real people, but who are making a change in our society. So this show is for everyone. The show is for community. It's for shining a light on things that people don't talk enough about and bringing the truth to light.
But age level, would this be, who should be watching it?
I would say 13 and up.
Okay, because what's very exciting, I'm going to compliment you, is before, and I guess the nature of the show, a lot of people haven't heard about it. You know, it's not a Fiddler on the Roof. It's not a show with a big name, but just hearing you talk about it gets me very excited, especially now because my wife works with autistic children, you know, so I really want her to see this now, which is very exciting. The show, then let's talk about the run date, and we'll talk about some other things, but the show opens up, you said, this coming weekend. Is that correct?
Yes, it opens on May 19th. It's a Friday evening.
Okay, and runs through when?
It runs through the 28th.
Okay, but I guess the real key, and I'll have you give the information, is that people have to check the SART website because it's running alternate performances with the show that Pasquale's in. So
that's right.
It's what, every other night or every other day, or you just got to check the schedule?
Check the schedule. It's actually almost every day because there's matinees on most days. So this coming weekend, we're Friday night, Saturday night, and then Sunday matinee. Next week, we're Thursday night, Saturday night, and Sunday matinee.
Okay, and so if folks want to get more information on the exact dates or seeing when this show is running as opposed to the other one, best bet, I guess, to go to the website. Do you have it handy, or I could dig it up?
I do. The website is, if you go to sartplays.com/49. If you could just go to sartplays.com, you'll be able to pull up the Azure Sky in Oz and see the production dates and times. I can tell you right now when it is. It's Friday, May 19th at 7:30, May 20th at 7:30, Sunday, May 21st at 2 p.m., Thursday, the 25th at 7:30, Saturday, the 27th at 2 p.m., and Sunday, the 28th at 7:30 p.m. So those are the 6 performances that we have the opportunity to bring to audiences.
Okay, the nice thing I think you should mention too to folks, that if you go to SART or Owen Theater, just about anywhere you sit, it's a good seat. You know,
absolutely.
It's a beautiful theater, and you've lived through it in terms of over the years. You've been to many productions at SART, but just talk briefly about the fact that it's really, I think, made a beautiful comeback, beautiful renovation, and the theater is a lot different than it was 10 years ago. What did they do to upgrade it a little bit?
So one of the things I think that the audience doesn't see that makes a huge difference for the performers are the renovations of the dressing rooms. Now, I know that might not sound like a very big deal because that's not something that the audiences are spending any time in those spaces. But that is where so much of the magic happens. That's where the gossip happens. That's where you're trying to get focused before you go on stage. And they're so beautiful. They did a wonderful job renovating it. I can't believe how fantastic they look. It used to be just like, I can't even explain to you what a huge difference it is, but it's phenomenal. And having a true green room. So for those who don't know what a green room is, it's where you can sit and have coffee, or if you knit, or if you like to read before you go on stage. It's where you can commune with the other artists if you're not in a one-person show like I am. And you know, it's just it's a place to relax in between, at the intermission, and before and after the show. And it's fantastic. I love what they've done with it.
Well, I have to say it, but I guess too, the renovated green room, I mean, there's no more leaks from the ceiling
No,
anymore? Okay,
no.
so that alone, I'll take a look at it. Talk also a little bit about, so this show runs then starting this coming weekend, runs for 2 weeks. Beyond the show, do you have anything on your agenda yet, performing agenda,
Well,
that you
I
can
actually
share?
yeah, I just opened a show in New York City, and we opened it this last Wednesday, and that is a murder mystery called Larry's Late Show, and I play a character named Angie D Cups, and who is a sultry chanteuse. But that show was written by a man named Richard Mover, who's a dear friend of mine in New York City. And that runs every Saturday night in Park Slope, Brooklyn. And I will be going back into that after this show closes. I'll be heading back in August. So that's an ongoing, really fun. It's in a speakeasy, and it's a murder mystery, but I get to sing some songs, and it's really, really fun. Beyond that, I guess the only other big news that I have, that I actually have not been public about yet, but I guess I'll break news on your
Okay.
podcast, is that I'm expecting a baby in October. So I'm working on a new play.
Okay, a new play. By the way, is that tough? I'm just listening to you. Juggling, and some actors do even more than that. But juggling two plays at one time, or I guess in your experience, you probably have sometimes juggle three at a time, I guess performing, rehearsing, and then
Absolutely. Yeah, I also am a director. So right now I'm directing a short play via Zoom. It's just for a reading that's happening on the 22nd, but I have rehearsal for that on Thursday before my dress rehearsal for Azure Sky. So yeah, I do a lot of juggling, but I find that part of the reason that I can do it well is that I've been doing Azure for so long. So I did 6 performances in St. Pete in 2020 or 2021. And then in 2022, I did 28 performances of it in Scotland. I did 3 performances of it in New York City, and I'm about to do 6 performances of it here. So even though it hasn't been consistent throughout time, it lives in my body. I just have to reactivate it. So I've been in intense rehearsals for the last few days for the show. But it's amazing what you remember. It's amazing what's actually what our brains can hold on to. I like diversifying what I do. Being able to go back into a show when I go back to New York City, that gives me a little bit of job stability, number one. But number two, it keeps me connected to my community. And outside of just pounding the pavement and auditioning, that's why I do this, is because I love collaborating with people. I love creating and working on new plays, especially. So Larry's Late Show is a new play. Azure Sky is an original play as well. So I love to work on shows that people are seeing for the first time. It's often you have to convince them to go to them
right.
because there isn't a track record. So I find that challenge invigorating, but also can be tough because you got to have butts and seats. So we're trying to get butts and seats.
The last question in terms of your performing career, also your directing career. Do you have preference, acting or directing?
Acting.
You really?
I'm a born actor. I think the reason I'm a good director is because I see things from an actor's point of view, and I feel like I can have that dialogue with actors and and sort of understand where they're coming from. I love directing because I love directing because when you see the bigger picture, there's more poetry in it. You don't get so, as an actor, when you're working on a role, you get so short-sighted because you're just thinking about what your character wants and what your character needs and how you're going to get there, what your objectives are. And when you're able to direct it, it's kind of like, it's that omnipresence. It's stepping back and seeing the whole picture and going, okay, but what does that mean in the long game? What does that say to the audience? How are we going to all end up in the same place? And I like taking people on that journey.
Your answer was an interesting one in that when I asked questions of actors who have been directors, most of them surprisingly tell me they prefer directing. But the reason they're not honest with me, Amanda, you at least were, is the reason they prefer directing is that they don't have to memorize the dialogue. So but it's funny, most people say they prefer directing. And I guess a final question, if I can, if folks want to keep track of you so they can get up to saw it this coming week, next 2 weekends, certainly. Any other way they can follow you? Instagram, Facebook, or what's the best way to keep track?
Absolutely. They can follow me at my website at amandaladd.com. They can follow me on Instagram at Amandarama NYC. Twitter, I'm Amanda Rama, and on Facebook, Amanda Ladd. You can find me on LinkedIn as well, but Amanda Ladd's my stage name. That's who I am. And something about that you said that I find really interesting about the actor-director sort of conundrum. I don't think a true actor is worth their weight unless the memorization is done. Like, I think the real acting happens after you've committed it to rote, because that's when the real magic happens. When I am directing actors, I don't even want to direct them until they know their lines.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Or the other one that's also interesting is that, and I've seen this happen, I don't know if you've had it yet, but where a director has then had to step in for somebody, usually if somebody
Yes.
gets sick or whatnot, director is the one who usually gets called up on this. But anyway, Amanda, I want to thank you for being my guest on this podcast show, and look forward to trying to get up to see you at SOT this coming next 2 weekends. And I'd also like to thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti. And it's been a real pleasure to see you again. It's been a long time.
Thank you so much, Blaine. Break a leg this weekend. Tequila.
Okay, exactly.